Gary's mod has a lot of maps in Gmod are all over the place. You can easily stumble upon one of the best designed maps you've ever played, then you find a map that's just beans. And all of this is possible thanks to the Steam Workshop, because anyone, ranging from a professional map designer to a 10-year-old Russian child, can upload their creation to the workshop. And trust me, there's a lot of those creations. We're gonna be taking a look at maps that I find weird.
Walter, put your dick away, Walter.
Now that's a pretty broad term, so I decided to split it into 3 categories. Maps that have a strange environment, an uncanny atmosphere, or confusing gameplay. Starting off with GM Parallax. Made in 2015 by Gooball60 and described as a psychedelic, colorful and confusing map. And it became so iconic that the creator decided to make a whole collection of maps with a similar design. When you first spawn in, it almost feels like your eyes are melting. But surprisingly, you'll get used to the weird color scheme pretty quickly. Although I do recommend buying some over-the-counter paint mats if you plan on playing on it for a while. Regarding gameplay, the map is very barren, and all you can really do is just run around and admire the different colors. The atmosphere is pretty lacking too, as Parallax doesn't have any ambience or music playing on it. And you're not really able to soak in the feeling of the map, as you'll be walking through narrow hallways most of the time. Now, I've been acting like a negative Nelly so far, but we're finally getting to the good stuff. The theme and design of this map is really nice. You'll never really get tired of looking at the walls, and the differently colored environments blend in pretty nicely. I stumbled upon this map a long time ago, back when I was just a little kid, browsing random Gmod hide and seek servers. But now, with a slightly more developed brain, I decided to see if this map still holds up, and play some hide and seek on it with my friends. Once they were finished throwing up, we started having a pretty good time because the mostly narrow hallways add to the tension, and the rounds didn't take too long because the map is pretty small. The only shortcoming I can really point out is just how overly simple the map is. Once you start to remember the layout of Parallax, it loses a lot of its original charm and mystery. Overall, I can definitely see why this map has so many downloads, but if I had to rank it in terms of its weirdness, I'd give it a 3 out of 10. The next map on the list is called GM Weirdcore. Made by Jero on November 8, 2022, the description doesn't really tell us that much, so enough yapping. You spawn in a very ordinary looking hallway, with some music playing in the background. I was surprised to find out that the song was actually taken from the GTA Vice City soundtrack, because it fits the map surprisingly well. It's also nice to finally hear an original song.
Just listen to some of this and it'll blow that poppy trash music right out of your head.
After making a few steps forward, you're gonna notice a door to your right. Opening it, you'll find a birthday cake.
Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday! Ah!
When you turn around to leave the room, 2 eyes with wings appear. Very spooky. Continuing to the right, you'll find some locked doors, and at the end of the hallway, darkness. Once you go inside, you'll appear on a floating floor, surrounded by mushrooms. The music suddenly stopped here for some reason. I think it's because the creator forgot to loop the song, which is a shame. Once you enter the glowing door at the end, you return back to the beginning. If you decide to walk past the darkness this time, you'll find a row of doors. The first one brings you to a swimming pool. Mosaic tiles cover the entire room from top to bottom, invoking a strange feeling of nostalgia. This room was very obviously made to imitate the vibe of pool rooms. We're gonna be moving on, because I wanna focus on the more original parts of the map. The next door leads you to a stone path surrounded by very nice looking trees. There's petals floating in the air that actually look really nice when you start to walk around. You might have noticed the 2 gigantic blue eyes just staring at you in the middle of the room. I like the trees more. Now, there's still a few more doors to go, so we're gonna pick up the pace. Door number 3 sends you to a strange room with clouds in the sky pasted on the walls. And if you didn't feel uncomfortable enough, the strange circle is constantly watching you.
I don't like the way you are looking at me.
Things take an interesting turn in the next door as you appear on a stairway. And once you walk down a few floors worth of stairs...
Hello everybody, my name is Mark. I apologize for the confusion, Markiplier isn't in the map. You can then either keep going down or enter the doorway in front of you. If you do so, you're brought to a strange floating platform with a chair in the middle. The game asks if you wouldn't want to spend eternity in such a nice place like this, but I don't see a phone with YouTube Shorts. If you try to leave, you start falling whilst being surrounded by the galaxy, eventually dying from fall damage. Choosing to keep going down makes the map question why you don't want to visit, and shortly after, you get teleported back to spawn. Door number 4 brings you to a strange forest. A steel clock surrounded by statues is placed in the middle. I'm not sure if the statue is an original model, but I really like how it looks for some reason. And finally, the last door. The door takes you to a room full of clocks, and once you make a few steps, you're asked a simple question. I think the spirit of lost time should mind their own business. Now, before we continue, I have to admit that I lied to you. There's actually one more door to go. But this one is a bit special. Unlike the other doors, the final door doesn't teleport you anywhere when opened, but it does reveal a church. And also a grave for some reason, but we'll get there, don't worry. The church is almost empty on the inside, with just a coffin laying in the middle. There's also a goblet that shows you a very scary JPEG jump scare when you interact with it. It's actually a Slayer album cover. That's it for the church. So on to the grave. When you come closer, you'll realize that it's actually empty. What happens when you jump in the grave is pretty hard to describe, so I'm just gonna stop talking. And that's the end of the map. I think that Weird Core is a pretty enjoyable map. The gameplay feels engaging. I was curious to explore each of the doors, and the environments were different enough to not feel repetitive. It also has a very uncanny feel to it. Seeing everyday objects be placed in such weird places, the sky just plastered on the walls like any other texture, and the Christian imagery making few but impactful appearances. Overall, it's a map that aims to explore many different aesthetics at the cost of its own identity, and I'm giving it a 5 out of 10 on the weirdness scale.
광명성 3호
The last map we're gonna be taking a look at is Kim Il-sung Square 2015. Made by Mark, the map aims to recreate North Korea's Central Square, where almost all major celebrations and military parades happen. Once you join the map, you spawn on a viewing balcony, giving you a nice overlook of the entire square. After making your way down, you're free to admire the very charismatic ex-leaders of North Korea. There's also what I thought was a grave, but it turns out that it's actually a stone tablet. I attempted to translate it, but ended up getting two wildly different answers, so it's up to you to decide which one is correct. Turning around, you realize just how big yet lifeless the square is. Fortunately, some interesting buildings are sprinkled throughout the map, helping it not feel completely barren. Some of them include the Grand People's Study House, the Korean Central History Museum, the North Korean Ministry of Foreign Trade, and the Ministry of Agriculture. Fun fact, the text you've been seeing on top of the buildings isn't actually their name, it's propaganda slogans. For example, the text written on the Ministry of Foreign Trade says, that's "Long live the glorious Workers' Party of Korea" for those who don't speak Korean. You might have noticed by now that the square feels very empty. Combine that with the stock Half-Life ambience that is constantly playing in the background, and suddenly I feel a bit uncomfortable playing this alone. If there's one thing this map excels at, it's making everything feel off. Like it's not actually a real city, just a concrete block filled with placeholder buildings. And compared to the real Kim Il-sung Square, I'd say they both give off the same vibe. The last part of the map that I want to talk about is the skybox. Even though most map creators only think of it as an afterthought, it's surprisingly well done, and the map maker even calls it roughly accurate. Some notable parts include Ryugyong Hotel, also known as the largest empty building in the world, the Great White Penis, also known as Juche Tower, and the Taedong River. As I was finishing making this review, I couldn't help but ask, why? Why make a map about such an obscure place? I've seen maps that replicate real places before, but North Korea seems like such a strange choice due to the lack of information and transparency. So I decided to contact Mark, the creator of this map, and ask him a few questions. And fortunately enough, he responded pretty fast. What inspired you to make a map like Kim Il-sung Square?
I've always been fascinated by North Korea and got the idea to make this map when browsing the workshop for maps about it. I was disappointed to find out there were almost none.
Which part of the map are you the proudest of?
My favorite parts include the podium and the flags that I had to model myself.
Do you plan to return to the map in the future? If so, what parts do you want to change or improve?
I'm planning on returning to it in the future and mainly updating the skybox.
Firstly, I want to thank Mark for answering my questions, and secondly, it's time for my verdict. I want to preface this by saying that I'm not here to give a professional review. I don't care if a map is detailed or polished. I'm taking more of a schizophrenic approach. I've decided to give Kim Il-sung Square a 7 out of 10 on the weirdness scale. Thank you so much for watching. This has been my first video ever, and hopefully not the last. Like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you again soon.